Hey guys, welcome to this video. Welcome if you haven't seen these videos before. Welcome back if you have. I'm just kind of playing here. I have this microphone and so hopefully this sounds okay. This is kind of new for me, but I'm going to just roll right into it. So my intention is always benevolence for all in alignment with the highest levels of love light. And yeah, let's just roll. So I was trying to record because I just have to share. I had a few comments on the sound, and so I had a few beautiful starseeds that donated to my cause, our cause, so to speak. So thank you. And I did purchase this microphone, and I'm in the process of purchasing one maybe over the ear because I know the sound quality isn't that great. So I was so excited. I was getting ready to use it, and I go on to Zoom, which is what I use, and it's saying that it's only using the computer audio. Then on top of that, the microphone that I purchased only works on an iPhone, and I have an Android. So it's just one thing after another. Every time I think I get excited, and this is it, and then another we'll call it stepping stone presents itself to ask, okay, Carrie, how are you going to work around this? So I have to purchase some adapters and Google it all to figure out how it all works. It's just funny. I'm developing a new relationship with software technology and computers. So I just want to roll right into some updates. Obviously, I'm not on Zoom right now, so if I have to end this and start a new video because of an interruption, I do apologize. I am in Florida, so we are in the process of preparing for Hurricane Dorian. And I just have to laugh because there's so much information that's coming in that I want to do several videos, but I'm doing what I can with the time I have allotted. And the biggest message that's come through that you guys have seen me post over the process of the last week has really been about holding space for ourselves. And so the question became, how do you hold space when you have a hurricane out of 4 predicted to possibly make landfall? And in addition to that, all of the other crazy things that are going on in the world, on Mother Earth. And the answer to that is simply you just do. You find a way. And so we're being asked to hold space for Mother Earth, to hold space for our bodies, to hold space for one another. The biggest messages that are coming through, so I'll go to that in just a minute. I've been writing up a storm, literally. So I'll share that as soon as I get that updated on my blog. I've been posting a lot to Instagram on Keep It Simple Starseeds if you guys have Instagram. And I still have yet to post on Facebook, so maybe I'll work on that at some point soon. So the reason I'm sharing it in this way is there's a lot of upheaval going on. And essentially we're feeling it in our bodies. And what I wrote about this morning, and I've talked a little bit about it as well, is that we're shifting, as many of you know, or maybe you don't, and you're just finding this channel and you're like, what is she talking about? Our bodies are changing, the earth is changing, our relationships are changing, everything is essentially rewriting itself. And while I won't go into all the details on that, we're feeling it physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, economically, and with all of the earth changes. So as above, so below. So if you're feeling an upheaval going on in your life or physically, that's going to be one aspect of it. The next layer is that is also happening to your family and friends. They may not be aware. They may not be awake to understanding what is going on within their own bodies, within their own structure of reality, right? Because we all have our own structures of reality that we exist within. We all have a different job. We have a different place that we live. We have different social structures. This is kind of where I'm going with that. And we've been invited as starseeds or light workers, whatever resonates with you, to hold space for one another because we're all going through this transition, transformation, integration, morphing together in our own individual way. Now, as this happens, we're going through this, our families and friends are going through it, So that means on the collective mass scale, this is happening. And so what happens is this also is felt, especially with the light worker and starseed community, even stronger, because we're not only holding space for our own bodies and our own reality matrix to, I just keep seeing like this flower unfolding and unfolding, or a puzzle, thinking of a puzzle, and the puzzle pieces don't fit together anymore. So it's like they're mushing it together. I talked about this as tectonic plates in my last video or the video before last. But this morning they showed me, my guides, my higher selves, showed me these puzzle pieces don't fit anymore. So they're reforming. The edges are being shaved off, morphed. Think of Play-Doh or clay, and it's being remolded and reshaped. And then new information is being embedded on top of that old information, and it's restructuring itself. So we're feeling these ripples of all these layers, right? And so we're feeling it, I'll get to that in just a moment. But if we're feeling it, that means as a group or a collective, everybody's experiencing it in their own way. So we're not only feeling our own stuff going on, but we might be sensitive to feeling what's going on in the collective, which can heighten our feelings of dis-ease, discomfort, things that we're used to, that's old energy, no longer fits in this equation. And so there is that period of, for some people, and I went through it too, I still go through it from time to time, where it's like, okay, how do I fit into this? How does this fit into my life? Does it fit anymore? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And you can tell when you're in resistance, because it literally feels like you're grinding your jaw, or like you're pushing up against wind, or your whole body's like tight. I catch myself sometimes doing that, and then I go, oh, we're getting downloads. Duh. And I'm in resistance because the old way that I was kind of following or kind of getting into flow about, all of a sudden doesn't work anymore. It's happening that quickly. So we have to shift with these new changes if we're going to be the change, right? It's like be the ball. I used the Globetrotters as an example the other day, that basketball team that goes around the globe and they do all these different tricks. And I was seeing us making a layup into the basket. And I was seeing us like be the ball, because it's going to change the different nets, the different places, the different ways that we are passing this energy around to one another, the different teams that we're playing with, that we're meeting, that we're coming across, and the different energies that we're anchoring. You know, we might make a shot and it doesn't work the same way that it did yesterday because we're on a different playing court. Even though it's a basketball game, and even though it's the same game and it's the same concept, which is our old foundation and our old structure, that's being rewritten every time we play a different team. And I'm just using this as an analogy, right? If that makes sense. And it's like we're taking on, or we're morphing each person of the team as well. So we're oftentimes reflected back to us our counterparts or our team members. And that's a whole other shift that's taking place. We're kind of leaving the old teams behind that we don't play well with anymore, that we're not mixing well with, and we're moving on to create these new systems with our new teams that aren't really new. We know them from previous incarnations, lifetimes, wherever that may be. So that's going to lead me into my next subject a little bit about what's going on. I'm just rolling with it. Is that, again, I kept hearing, and I posted a lot of things on Instagram about this, but it's move like a jellyfish. Rhythm don't mean nothing. Go with the flow. You don't stop. You know, the Jack Johnson song. And it's essentially moving and just letting this kind of allow us to not be in resistance. And we don't necessarily have the perceived power to change everything in one snap of your fingers. So we may not be able to stop something from happening from one perspective. And again, this is one perspective. There's so many multidimensional perspectives. So from another perspective, that might not be true, but from this perspective that I'm trying to offer from more of a linear perspective, we may not be able to just snap our fingers and stop a storm. And that may not be what we're supposed to do either. And that's a whole other perspective, right? Or we may not be able to stop fires in Africa, in the Amazon. We may not be able to stop earthquakes. We may not be able to stop certain things from one perspective. But what we can do is control our response to what is unraveling, unfolding, laying out before us. And so that was another obviously what I've been talking about for the last week. So they're asking me to go back to the Globetrotters. So we are representing a team all over the earth. And within that team, we're starting to connect the dots, which I've kind of posted and talked a little bit about. And we are the dots, right? We are the light workers and the starseeds. So we're starting to gather up. That doesn't mean that's the only team that we have. It's like all of a sudden we're gathering our forces, so to speak, our forces, our foreseeing, our team that we've been connected to in and across many places, many lifetimes. And so I'm going to move into what else is happening in the collective. Some people are starting to remember memories. And I'm going to start with this linear lifetime. So for me, as I kind of morph and shift and I become that jellyfish, I am the ball, changing the position, the play, the movement, the flow. Am I bouncing? Am I going through the air? Am I spinning? And just changing based on the dynamics of that moment. So what's happening is I might have a memory or a dream or see someone or connect with someone from my past in this lifetime, we'll start there, that I forgot about or that I wasn't aware of. Let's just say that things are being represented and represented. Like all of a sudden you might have a conversation about someone that you hadn't had a conversation about in a very long time. And then that thread ties in with our map, our GPS of who we were 10 years ago. And all of a sudden, we start remembering little bits and pieces. What happens is, for myself, I feel those, and I recognize that I am, that's fine as long as I don't have the microphone right there. Getting used to these things. I'm also crunched into this space because I have all of my patio furniture in my office and in all around. Anyways, so I'm recognizing that that person isn't me. And it's funny because I had a conversation with someone the other day, and they had run across someone who knew me, I would say almost 20 years ago. And they still have that same concept of me. And I talked about this like in 5 videos ago, I think. We aren't that same person. And so it's easier for me to let go of those expectations. I don't feel the need to connect with that person anymore, even though I could make that choice to reconnect. But I don't really want to tie those lines back together because for me, I'm using that as a very valuable system. That was a stepping stone, and that person was an important aspect in my life at that time to lead me to where I am today. And this leads me back into the playing courts. Like, we're not playing on the same court. We might still be playing basketball, right? But we're the Globetrotters now. We're not the high school team, We're not playing in grade school. So the field is bigger, it's expanded, it's become more advanced. Our plays have become more advanced. And this is leading me into, before I forget, our extrasensory abilities and what's happening. So let me go backwards for just a moment. So what happens is we have these people come up or show up in our lives through conversation, through social media, through memories, through dream time, And you might just have little sparkles that, I haven't thought about that person in a while. What's happening from one perspective, it's giving us that opportunity to look back and say, I now clear that, or I appreciate that person, place, or thing. Because that is, again, back to that Play-Doh, back to the game. I learned how to play basketball thanks to this person who it might not have been grateful for that experience at the time, in that timeline, on that court that I was playing in, but now it's made me a better player, and I'm utilizing those gifts that were gifted to me from that experience now on this playing field. So it's like that old playing field. We could call it 3D, we could call it an old timeline, we could call it an old version of us, right? And guys, that's so many layers to those two. So those are all correct in one way. And it's almost like we're utilizing that, and it's like cell mitosis. It's like, okay, that's part of us. Now we're here. Now we're here. So it's fractal, right? If you've ever looked at those fractal designs, it's like, whoa. So that's all morphing for us very quickly. And it's the clay that's essentially coming together. And so the guides also showed me netting dough to bake the bread. So that was an ingredient that was utilized for this now master recipe that we are becoming. And I'm not saying I'm not going to use that ingredient because I refuse to. That would be resistance, and that would be blocking those ingredients from making, and perhaps that ingredient is the leavening that is needed to rise, right? So we might need those to allow us to rise to a higher level, if that makes sense. So this is happening in a lot of different ways. This is also happening in the physical. I mentioned my pain body came up. A pain body can be emotional. It can be a formation. Mine was physical, but it's tied to previous lifetime experiences, this lifetime experiences, or perhaps loops, right? Not necessarily where we never learned our lesson, but here it is coming up again because we're in a portal, we're in some type of activation that then triggers this response, like Pavlov's dogs, I think it's Pavlov, where we're like, okay, this is a reminder I need to be still, because if I'm not, my body shuts down and I get sick because I'm in resistance. I'm not in balance. I'm not in harmony. Or perhaps we are in that looping system and it is a lesson. I don't like to see everything as a lesson. I like to see it as an ingredient. How can I digest this? How can I utilize this as energy, as a resource to further express who I am becoming, but who I already am, if that makes sense. So for a lot of people, it's showing up in the physical. For me, it was lower back. But in addition to that, those physical symptoms and pain bodies are not necessarily a pain body either. So I refuse, or I see it, I feel it, and I ask, is this a pain body? Is this something that is being presented to me as such that I need to integrate and all of that? I honor that experience. And is it tied or associated to a memory, a trigger, etc.? But moving forward from that, it isn't necessarily that at all. It could just be that the body is shifting and changing due to the activations and upgrades, downloads that we are receiving. So our body is going from a carbon to crystalline, and that is morphing also. And I always like to reference, if you guys have ever watched Werewolves in London. I know it's a gross, horror, scary old horror movie, but it's a classic. And these people become werewolves. You know, they howl at the moon and they crunch and they crackle and they morph into this wolf. But that's essentially what's happening. Our body is like shifting and getting into alignment. And so what'll happen is one day we'll feel really off. We'll be like, gosh, this just feels out of whack, out of alignment. And all of a sudden the next day we're like, oh, right? It came back into alignment, and we're being invited to allow and not be in that old space of, oh, can't believe this is happening again. This is miserable, you know, not putting a label on it, just sitting with it, you know, okay, interesting. And the more we can be in that receptivity, the word that's coming up is attunement, right? We're going through an attunement. We're going through an atoning. Not like atoning for our sins. It's at one, atom. It's atone. It's a tone. It's a frequency. It's a harmonic. We're tuning our instruments. And sometimes when you tune an instrument, it doesn't sound good at first. And then all of a sudden, it comes into alignment. So they're also sharing with me that that's going on, obviously, not only on the molecular level, but it's happening with the earth as well. So there are things that have to shift, creak, crumble, move, flow, wave, blow, right? Wind, air, water, crystals, to shift and to essentially rewrite old programs. So what else was being shown to me was that I kept getting references last week to the tables have turned. And while I feel to some extent it's a pole shift, right? That wasn't the exact message that was coming through for me, because for me, there are things that are shifting. We have a tendency to think of it as, for me, it's polarization, right? Polar opposites. The tables have turned. And the reference to me was more of an Alice in Wonderland. Like what's, how does Lewis Carroll say it? What's upside down is right side up kind of thing. Like that's all turned. And so everything is exposed. All the roots are exposed. All of the fungus is exposed from one perspective, right? But that's also a good thing from another perspective, because we get to see, oh my goodness, this has been what's holding us together. The roots of everything is being exposed, the light as well as the dark. So what they were showing me also in relationship to that wording or that play on words is those tables have turned. And so the roots of the structures are being exposed. And then essentially, if you picture the roots dangling below, now it's flipped upside down and they're growing up. So they're uniting from the bottom up, which also has to do with our Kundalini, energy. Sometimes I make up my own words, guys, because that's what we're doing. We're rewriting. We're rewriting how we communicate. Our body is rewriting. Our memories are being rewritten. So it's not just that we're rewriting our memories, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but what they're sharing with me is our codons are rewriting, our DNA is rewriting, but it's not like we're losing who we were. It's not like we're erasing it. We're writing over it. So it's still there, but it's being, again, utilized as energy. And so these roots have now been exposed and they're being given the opportunity to grow up. So now we have this foundation, they're there, and we're seeing a different view, right? We're seeing things upside down, but it is on the upside. And what they're sharing also is that as we rewrite these programs, think of a CD, and we're essentially spinning our records. And so this has to do with the Akash. This has to do with our physical body, our emotions, and so on and so forth. And they keep showing me these memories. So if, let's say you have a memory of an ex-friend, an ex-boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, a relationship, for example. And this is just one example. It can be many different things. It can be an experience you had as a child. It can be a conversation. I mean, they're literally things that mapped our old system before. Now we're seeing it. It's being exposed or re-exposed so that we can see things from a different perspective. Whereas a year ago, we might have looped that system and integrated it in one way because of where we were a year ago. Now it's being represented in a different sound, and we're able to read between the lines, right? So now we're seeing this and going, oh, wow, I see more, right? I see more. And what's happening is, keep getting reference to Seymour, the Venus flytrap. That's a whole other spin, I can tell. We're going to go on that rabbit trail next. But what's happening is we're able to see more from a different perspective. and then we utilize that. So it's like we thought that was old and had died out, but in actuality, it's still there for food, for our repatterning and our rewriting. So we're using this old program and we're writing over it. And this is happening on all levels, right? It's also happening on the earth. It's not like parts of the earth are disappearing. The pyramids that are found under the ocean are still there, right? But they're being utilized in a different way, or they've changed. So, but it's also what's coming through is we're actually going back to the old because it's a circle. It's cyclical. So we are remembering as we rewrite old memories to rewrite and morph with. So it's just like when I use language in my writings on the, well, wherever, Instagram or the blog, and other people too. It's not just me. We make these words because the vibration of these two old words in a new combination, put in a certain new order, creates a new harmonic around old convergences. It's a converging and morphing together of everything: ideology, linguistics, geography. So much is happening. And this is an analogy of everything. All is shifting and different. So I'm going to get back to how we're not going to be feeling the same really ever in just a moment, but I want to kind of stay on that string. So what happens is as we morph into these, as these all converge, everything changes, right? And so these patterns are presented, and then we are creating from this new rewrite. And it's constant. It's like a constant shift that's happening. So it's like we feel sometimes like we get comfortable and then we're not comfortable. And then we're comfortable and then we're not comfortable. And for those, that's why it's so important to just be in that flow, because for those of us who feel that need to control, it'll be even more difficult sometimes because that's the old. It isn't that way from one perspective. However, we are being invited to control, so to speak, and I'm being guided to share the word contrology. Like Pilates, contrology is the control of movement and flow in the body, right? And Joseph Pilates called Pilates contrology. And essentially, it's this moving and morphing according to how the body wishes to flow. So you have to listen to your body. You have to listen in a higher sensory perspective than we may have done at one time. And that becomes, we become moving flow rather than having to be in control in a rigid way. And the other, I kind of lost, I'm in such flow right now. Again, they're reminding me to say it's nothing is lost, everything is built upon. If we can see it in that way. And our viewpoints will constantly be changing. So everything is different. The way that we move, the way that we talk, the way that we listen. Okay, so they're guiding me to talk about the extrasensory perception. A lot of people are in extreme discomfort right now because, again, it isn't ever going to feel the same. So if we're looking for something to go back to the way it was, we'll always be looking. We'll always be searching because it is never going to be how it was. Everything is upside down. So essentially it is, because it's going back to the old way of things. The ancient ancestors have risen. So that's another video I'll go into maybe in some more depth. But our grandmothers, our ancient ancestors who seeded, and I'm seeing this as the seed of life, the originators, the original, the oneness and all things is essentially growing in formation. The information is able to be accessed now that we were feeling unable to access before. And that can feel very expansive. And whereas we're used to coming from this small container, now sometimes it can be uncomfortable to feel the expansiveness that we are, if that makes sense. Whew. So, getting a little hot. So as we grow into this new container, it's like we feel like we have to hold back. And it almost feels like it isn't able to be contained in some cases. So that's where that contrology assists us, if that makes sense. Also, what I'm seeing are these ancient things resurface, ancient structures, ancient knowledge. This is not only happening outside of us, meaning we're finding it on, you're hearing about things being discovered, rediscovered. So it is the old. Again, the old is resurfacing. We're not only tapping into the ancient knowledge that I'm going to use as an example outside of us. So for example, there's beautiful physicists that are discovering things about the universe. They're not new discoveries. They've always been there, but to us, they're new discoveries. So that's an example of we're rewriting the old, which is, let's say, a couple hundred years old, with the information from billions of years ago. But it's not even that, it's infinite knowledge that is essentially coming up through these new frequencies that has happened because we've embodied, activated, integrated, and essentially created this shift, right? This new event, this new earth, this new divine marriage. We've reunified with ourselves, so to speak. So all of this knowledge that was blocked before is trickling through. But I see it as, it's like, I see a lot of references to lava, cracks in the earth, and it's bubbling up. And what they keep showing me is gas, like gas is escaping, gas bubbles. And as this, let's picture a gas bubble. Let's say it makes a gurgle, for example. Well, within that bubble is a sound. It's a gurgle. And as that's released, it's released into our field, our knowingness. And so the more bubbles that come up, the more we're connected to all of that, so to speak. And that's just one perspective, one perception. So we're feeling that gurgle, 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 maybe literally in our bodies as this comes up from the earth. And we're feeling those cracks as our spine shifts and our hips move and our shoulders are creaking and moving and everything's expanding. Our head is expanding. Everything is growing to create that space. So there's this gas and lava, this heat rises, it's able to escape. And as it escapes, it becomes known, or it presents itself in form, in formation. So this is happening all across the collective, but that's what I just said was so multidimensional. Now, of course, this is happening galactically through all kinds of things, which I don't really get into that much because I want to focus on the earth, but it's happening in black holes and nebula and star systems. And I mean, it's just so expansive when you look into it that it's amazing. So I'm hearing Amazing Grace, Stars and Stripes, Star Spangled Banner, Long May You Wave. So there's a lot. I wrote about that, I think, 4th of July blog. Anyways, so it's this new freedom that essentially we're feeling. And what happens in that case, for example, they're asking you to stay on that flow, is it's like being released, and they're saying play on words with relaced. So it's like they're taking the shoe out of one shoelace and they're lacing it and tying it together with another shoe so that we can have double the foundation, but it's going to feel weird. And so what they're kind of showing is that the lace interlacing is also like lattice work, but also relaying. And also what's happening is as this is, I get, so I'm going all over the place. Ley lines, this is happening in the structures. But essentially what's happening is this is the layup on the team. Thanks, guys. I just have to crack up because they're giving me all these pictures. My higher self. So it's like, relaying. So these relay messages are happening in real time, right? It's boom, 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 boom. And as these shifts occur, it's interlaying, right? It's interlaying responses. So it's our ability to respond is happening real time. And what happens is we come into this alignment and we essentially then not only, I want to get back to that space of, I'm just all over the place. It's beautiful. Oh, grace, long may you wave. So what happens is we're in this, sometimes feeling freedom can feel a little uncomfortable. If you've been in a cell block in the dark and all of a sudden you're released out into freedom and you're breathing air differently, you're seeing things differently. It's bright, it's expansive, and it can be a little overwhelming and feel a little scary at times. And some people, some beings are going to have that natural inclination, because that's what they've been programmed to do, to go back to that crawl space, go back to the dark, go back and hide because it feels safer. And so for those of us that are aware of what's going on, we're here to offer our hand, or not even say, come with me, I'll help you. It's also their responsibility. So we have to hold our own, ourselves in our highest standards. We have to stand as one with our higher selves, with source energy, with Mother Earth, and hold that space. And as we hold the space, the cracks that are formed, the freedom that can freak some out, is able to stabilize. And there's a lot more where that came from. Boundless is what they're saying. So in binding our new bindings together, they're kind of showing me snowboarders, and you've upgraded your old bindings, your old bootstraps, and now we've upgraded into hoverboards. So we're still bound by what they're showing me is a foundation, but we have the ability to jump around. We have the ability to fly. Whereas before we were strapped in, and now that's been kind of whoosh, released. And so that is within our own responsibility to stabilize that ability to fly. So again, it's like I'm hearing we're learning to fly, but we don't have wings. We don't see that the wings are there. So it's like, how can we fly? I don't know. So it's getting out of the head and it's coming back into knowing that we are able to fly in an energetic sense, of course, from what I'm referring to right now. Whew, I think that was a lot. Maybe I'll end on that note because I went a little longer than expected. So that's essentially what's going on. There's a lot more going on as well. And we've got a lot of help through the elements, through the sun. And again, the more information that we come in, that we come into knowing, that we feel, it's again about allowing space for others and not forcing anything, not forcing others to see from our expansiveness. Because again, I'm going to use the example of, think about where you were 5 years ago, or when you were a kid and you said, I'm never going to forget what it was like to be 13, because your parents didn't get you, no one understood you, and you felt all alone because you're going through teenage, pre-teenage, teenage wasteland. What happens is going off on a flow about the who. Who are you? Alice in Wonderland, who are you? The caterpillar. It's like if you watch a movie or you see yourself as 13, you now know what you didn't know when you were 13. But it's important to remember what you did remember when you were 13. Because you don't want to lose that inner child. You do want to say, you're right, I don't forget what it was like to be a kid. I am not forgetting, but I am seeing things from a broader, higher perspective. And I'm not going to force my 13-year-old perspective on someone else, okay? Or someone else might be forcing their 13-year-old perspective on you when that's what they're relating to, and you're relating to your infinite perspective, right? But that doesn't mean that they're going to see that as a 13-year-old. If that makes sense. And so again, it's offering space. What would you do for a 13-year-old? You wouldn't argue with them because you're never going to win. And it isn't about winning. It's about unwinding the need to win. is what they're sharing with me. So as we do that, we allow things to just kind of settle. And it creates less boundaries. It creates less ties to old energies. I'm going to end on that note. And so I offer you the highest levels of love light in benevolence for all. And I invite you just to breathe, take a deep breath in. And so it is. Namaste.